Thank you, everybody. Pleased to be here. I am going to talk a little bit about some of the legal issues that interplay with our discussions to date about addressing and supporting employees in a recovery-friendly work environment. I'm mainly going to focus on the Americans with Disabilities Act, which I think is probably the primary issue that employers encounter. And I think the good news is that the law actually does allow us as employers and as employees to be compliant with the ADA, but yet be supportive of employees' recovery efforts. So it isn't a zero-sum game. So to talk, no, I don't have a conflict of interest. To talk a little bit about how the ADA interplays with drug use and alcoholism by employees. I think we're at a point now where things have progressed, where employers understand that in this job economy, there's a self-interest about wanting to keep and retain our employees. And there's also a moral interest in trying to help support people in our organization to overcome substance use issues and to support their substance use recovery. So just to kind of reorient us to the ADA, and I know many of you are familiar with these concepts, the Americans with Disabilities Act is designed to support and give opportunity to qualified individuals. And to be a qualified individual, you need to be an applicant or an employee that is able to do the essential functions of the job with or without reasonable accommodation. So that is where the ADA protections come into place. You do need to be a qualified individual to, as a starting point, as you know. And the reasonable accommodation piece, I think, is particularly important when we're talking about substance use recovery, because there are many things that employers can be doing to work with their employees to try to help them in their recovery efforts. There is a distinction under the ADA between alcoholism and drug use. Under the ADA, alcoholism may be a protected category. You can be protected as a qualified employee if you are an alcoholic, and if you otherwise satisfy the definition of disability. With drug use, there is a difference. The ADA does not protect an individual who currently engages in the use of illegal drugs. However, the ADA may protect a recovering drug addict who's no longer engaging in illegal drug use and who meets the other requirements of the definition of disability and who's qualified for the job. So in all of this, the idea of you being qualified for the position as an employee is paramount. It's important to know that the use of the word currently is somewhat of a misnomer. It does not require you to, as an employer, to have an employee who is that very minute engaged in illegal drug use. It can be essentially weeks, days, months after drug use. You simply have to have a reasonable belief that the drug use, the illegal drug use, I should say, is ongoing. Now, there's some good things for employers and employees in the ADA. Because what I get a lot from employers is that people really do want to support their employees, but they're concerned about how to juxtapose that desire with the need to run a safe and efficient business. So the ADA recognizes that an employer can comply with laws other than the ADA, like the drug-free workplace law. The ADA recognizes that an employer can require an employee to meet the same performance standards. So if you have a person who's an alcoholic, you have a person who is recovering, you can have them meet the same performance standards as somebody that doesn't have those challenges. You have a right as an employer to prohibit the use of alcohol or illegal drugs in the workplace. You can legitimately require that employees not show up to work under the influence. And you can legitimately discipline an employee who violates your workplace policies about prohibiting the use of drugs and alcohol. So a lot of employers want to be supportive, but they're trying to navigate, how do we be supportive of an individual, yet still not lose sight of the fact we need to have a safe workplace and we need to have policies that can promote that. There are some helpful resources out there that we've talked about, I think, in some of our other sessions, but one resource that I really commend you to look at is the Jobs Accommodation Network. And that organization, it's a nonprofit, and it has wonderful resources out there for employers and employees about what can be helpful to accommodate employees who are recovering and could use some help. And there is a helpful analysis that Jan has set forth in its materials. And this is a 7-part question process, which just helps you as an employer and even as an employee to figure out how do these issues about somebody having substance use challenges, how do they interplay with what we can be doing to help them? So you really look at what are the limitations the employee is experiencing. Maybe there are none. How do any limitations affect the employee and the employee's job performance? What are specific job tasks that are problematic as a result of these limitations? Again, maybe there aren't any, maybe there's some. What accommodations are available to eliminate these problems? Are we, as an employer, using all possible resources to determine possible accommodations? Are we, thinking outside of the box? Has the employee been consulted about possible accommodations? The good news with the ADA is it's an individual and it's a individualized and unique approach. So the employee's perspectives and feedback is really important. Once an accommodation is in place, it's a great idea to revisit it with the employee. Is the accommodation working? Is there something else we can be doing? And how are we with our supervisory personnel and employees? Do we need training in these areas to help them understand? As I said, the Job Accommodation Network also provides accommodation ideas. They've organized that in a couple of different ways, and I do have at the end of the slides, as others have had before me, a list of resources available to you, and I have that site. But one thing that I think is neat is that they organize accommodations by limitation. So the next couple of slides, I just go through very briefly some of the ways they've organized the limitation. Does somebody have problems with attentiveness and concentration? Here are some options as accommodations to help that and help that person with those substance use issues. And I should say, I'm going to go through another couple of slides very quickly, but all of these have some degree of overlap. So if you go on the JAN website and you're looking, you're going to see a lot of the same types of potential accommodations. I tried to give you different examples. Another limitation could be maybe decreased stamina, fatigue, maybe periodic rest breaks, maybe working from home remotely, maybe a modified workspace. Another limitation, perhaps executive functioning deficits, applications for concentration, maybe extra time, maybe job coaches, maybe on-site mentoring. Non-compliant behavior, and that can be somewhat of a red flag that people call my office. You have an employee who is struggling, and one of the red flags has been the non-compliant behavior. Here are some additional thoughts about ways to accommodate that, including counseling and therapy. Stress intolerance. Again, counseling and therapy, perhaps flexible scheduling, perhaps job restructuring. When you go on the website, and if you do, I really encourage you to do, because it's just a lot of good resources, what you will see is that you will come up and see ideas that maybe you never would have thought of, even talking with your employee about what can we do to help. Something important to remember that kind of, I think, gives employers a little bit of added assurance and confidence in trying to reach out and be proactive and work with the employee. You're trying to accommodate the employee's ability to perform the essential functions of the job. You are not obligated to accommodate the employee's use of illegal drugs or use of alcohol. You're simply trying to help them do what they need to be able to perform the job. And you may hold the employee to the same, not stricter standards as employees who don't experience substance abuse or substance use challenges. That could include discipline. So That is a good in the sense that it's good for the employer in that it gives you the ability to have some flexibility to run your operations and have a safe workplace. But it's fair to the employee too, because somebody who has these struggles or is recovering does not need to be labeled in a negative way or having some negative assumptions about them when you wouldn't react as negatively to somebody else that did the same exact thing. So what you are trying to do is you're trying to address the issue of employee performance or employee misconduct, but you are not penalizing anybody for their status as recovering or struggling from substance use issues. Some other options could include, we talked about this, referral to EAP and require participation in EAP, or last chance or firm choice agreements. And I know that that was covered with Matt and with Hypotherm in our previous session. And I really encourage and commend employers that take that approach, because at the end of the day, you want to keep that employee, you want them to succeed, you don't want to be a roadblock in their abilities to succeed, but yet at the same time, it gives everybody the chance to do that. If the last chance agreement doesn't work out, it isn't because the person was suffering or working through a challenge with alcohol use or with recovery. It was because of their objective behavior that didn't comport with the workplace standards. So to give people that extra chance, I think, is really critical and helpful to everybody. We all got an interest in attracting and retaining good employees, and these strategies, a lot of which have been discussed already with Set and with Matt, are very much a win-win situation for employers. I have my citations to some places I've relied on in this presentation. They're all great places to look, and happy to open up our session for further discussion and questions. Thank you.